Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Cassie, I'm the Evil Secret Ninja, and I talk about books and review books on my channel. So today I'm going into things that I like about young adult fiction, and things that I don't like about young adult fiction. And I'm going to say that sometimes things might seem a little counter to things that I like, say, in adult fiction. This could have something to do with like the mood I'm in when I read it, but then there are also things that really annoy me about young adult fiction, and it doesn't seem to matter what mood I'm in. If I come across certain things, I kind of lose interest. So here are 10 things that I like about reading young adult fiction. The first one is that they often have a female protagonist. For instance, Onyx and Ivory, which is a young adult fantasy by Mindy Arnett, and this follows a girl who has been kind of shunned by her society, and she is trying to find her way in the world, even though she has been pretty much exiled. The second thing I like about young adult fiction, and this is kind of more of a mood thing, what kind of mood I'm in when I'm reading, is that there's often not tons of blood, guts, and gore. It's not like overly dark and depressing and dismal, but still has an appropriate amount of action and adventure and everything like that. And the series that I thought did that well was the Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. This is a young adult dystopian. So in the future, mankind has solved all of its major problems. Nobody goes hungry. If you die, you're brought back to life. You get sick, you can go get healed. Everybody's basic needs are met by the Thunderhead, which is a benevolent artificial intelligence. And it follows the Scythes, which are a group of people who their job is to glean the people to make sure that overpopulation does not occur. This was pretty good, and like I said, it has its dark moments. It's about people killing people, obviously, but it also isn't too dark. The next thing that I like about young adult fiction is that often it will talk about serious issues that people deal with and talk about it in a way that is easy to understand and isn't as complicated as sometimes they make it in adult fiction. And I thought that this was done really well in Dumplin by Julie Murphy. And this is about a girl who, she's considered like the fat girl of the town, and her mother is a former beauty queen, and she decides she is going to go out for the beauty pageant, even though it will piss off her mom. But I thought this did really good, talking about relationships between teenagers and talking about grief in a way that was pretty simple, but still kind of got to the point, like this is what happens when you're grieving. The next thing has to do with specifically young adult fantasy. I found that there's some really inventive magic systems, and they're not afraid to use magic in sometimes I've noticed in like adult fiction, they try to put as little magic in them as possible, but young adult, they have no problem using the magic, and sometimes it's rather interesting. And I thought this was represented well by Roar by Cora Cormick, and this is a young adult fantasy about a princess who finds that she does not have a magical ability, and so she decides she's going to run away from her kingdom. The magic system in this is based on pulling the hearts out of storms and using the hearts of the storms as magic. And I thought that was a rather inventive system of magic. The next thing that I like about reading young adult is I've found some very inventive stories in young adult fiction. One of the most interesting I've read recently was called Wolf by Wolf by Ryan Garding. This is an alternate history where if Hitler won World War II, and now one of his human experiments is coming after him to assassinate him. And I thought it was a really great story, and that it did really well looking at the historical items of the day and making a good story about it. The next thing that I like about YA is often it's based on like a variety of settings. You have sometimes in adult fiction, especially fantasy, I feel like sometimes it's pretty much medieval, most of it. I think in young adult, especially young adult fantasy, they have more of a variety of settings, such as We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Fazil, and this is an Arabian inspired fantasy where they're troping through the desert, and the main character is trying to fix the magics in this world, and obviously there's someone trying to stop her. Another thing that I like about young adult fiction is sometimes they do really great retellings, like retellings of fairy tales and different things like that, and putting like more of a modern type spin on them. And I thought that A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer did a pretty good job of that. This is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. It was a little bit darker than Beauty and the Beast, which I enjoyed, but kind of still stayed true to the story. And even though a lot of times I'm annoyed by romances in young adult, this one was not that bad. Often gives a window into mind of young adults and teenagers, which is for my profession where I'm working with kind of an age range of people. It's nice to get like, oh, this is what younger people are thinking these days, and this is how they're processing things and working things. So it kind of helps me find a way in to help them a little bit better. I guess the one I want to highlight for this is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus, and this is a young adult mystery. There's a group of kids in detention. One of them dies, and so everyone there is a suspect, and everybody has something to hide. If I'm in the mood for this, sometimes I'm not, but this is when I'm in the mood for something, I know it's going to end well. I start a young adult series, even though a lot of times, especially in the middle books, if it's a series, really bad things are going to happen. But at the end, I know that it's going to turn out okay, and that the characters are going to be okay, and more than likely, the characters that I'm invested in are not going to die, which is not always the case with adult fiction. And the one that I thought of for this was the Queen of Cursed Things by S.M. Gaither. And this is about a girl who has the ability to control curses in the world that she's in. And this is a fantasy series as well, but she can when she goes someplace, she can see, oh, there's a curse on this item, even if it's underground, or this ground is cursed, or these trees are cursed, and she has the ability to use that curse against her enemies. And some really horrible things happened in it. It was not all happy-go-lucky, but at the end, everything turned out okay. Okay, so the last one, I'm pretty sure this is the last one, I keep kind of finding more, is I find that there's good representation in young adult fiction. There's more representation of like LGBTQ or even disabilities, a little bit more prevalent in young adult than it is adult. And I thought this they showed this in When the Moon Was Ours by Anna Marie McLemore. LGBTQ representation in it. It's about her girl and her boyfriend, and there's some magical realism. The girl grows roses out of her hands, and there's these sisters that keep trying to steal her roses. But it did a really nice job. The romance in it was actually quite interesting. So those are the things that I like about young adult fiction. Those are the things that when I read the young adult fiction, I'm like, this is what I'm after, this is why I'm going to read it. And now I'll get into some of the things that I don't like. And again, sometimes I get that it's a mood thing, but for the most part, these are the things that just really grind my nerves. First thing, love triangles. Love triangles annoy me so much. There is no better example of this than the Twilight series by Stephanie Meyer. The whole 4 books was nothing but a love triangle. It was awful. hated every minute of it. The second thing that annoys me about young adult fiction, and this is especially with fantasy, but I've seen it in other areas as well, they all start to sound the same. Certain tropes that just happen over and over and over again in young adult fiction, and they just all start to sound the same. And the one that I thought kind of portrayed this pretty good was Awakens by Elise Kova. And this was just every young adult trope that I could think of. There was a girl who was kind of the chosen one, and the prince who's the son of the evil king, but somehow he's good. And of course, the romance is based on them and him convincing her that he's a good person and that she should trust him, even though he does horrible things, but he has to because of his father, betrayal, all those things that they all start sounding the same. They all start sounding like you could just change the names, change the country, and every chapter follows a certain outline. That also goes into the next one, which is that there's a lot of overused tropes in young adult fiction. The chosen one, someone gets kidnapped, and they have to give up something very valuable to save that person. And of course they always do, and it never turns out well. And I thought that the Kill the Queen by Jennifer Estep and the Crown of Shards series, that did that pretty good. Everything is just, it had the trope in there where they lie to somebody to protect them, which again is one I've seen a lot in young adult fiction, and that's one of my least favorite things in any type of fiction. You don't lie to people to protect them, you tell them the truth. You're not lying to protect them, you're lying to protect yourself. Next thing that I struggle with young adult fiction is that sometimes it doesn't go far enough. So, yeah, well, sometimes I'm like, okay, this didn't get too bloody, this didn't get too into it. A lot of times I'm like, this really just didn't go far enough. It just didn't go far enough. And I think that The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones was that way. Bone Houses was about these kids who work in the graveyard, and if they don't do certain things, then the dead come back to life, and they call them bone houses. And I guess I kind of was like, I'm not sure where this story's going. Like, they could have put a little bit more feeling or effort into what was going on and how these bone houses come back and what they do, and it just kind of was a little bit too light for me. Next thing that I struggle with regard to young adult fiction is that the downplaying of human experiences. It just kind of makes light of human experiences and this idea that everything turns out okay. I saw that in With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I was actually really excited to read this one. It was about a single mother who's trying to take care of her child and at the same time trying to provide a better life for her child by going back to school and learning to be a chef. And I just thought it kind of downplayed being a single mother and the struggles that happen when you're a single mother, especially when you're young and you're a single mother. I felt like it didn't represent that population well enough or deep enough. Number 6, annoying romances. I don't mind when there's a little romance in a book. I don't mind when the main character falls in love with someone. It's fine. What I don't like is when the romance becomes the main focus of the story, especially when the book is not a romance. And I thought that Strange the Dreamer by Lani Taylor was one of those times when I was actually really liking the story. It was about this kind of cursed city, and they're trying to figure out what the curse is and break the curse, and they know it has something to do with these dead gods, only they're not dead. And Strange is dreaming about them. And I was really liking it, but the romance totally turned me off. I made it so I didn't even want to continue the series. I don't even care how it ends because that was so annoying. And that's not something, if I read it in a different mood, I would be okay with, because that just kind of ruins my interest. The romance ended up taking away from the main story and getting so wrapped up in this romance without solving the problem that's faced before them. The next thing that I don't like about young adult fiction would be when they downplay things like attachment. They make it sound like it's so easy for people, especially children, to attach to somebody new. And I guess being who I am and working as a therapist, I know that that is absolutely not true. And I thought that was highlighted in Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. And these kids attach to this caregiver way too easily. They just didn't go into like how difficult it would be, especially children who have like lost a parent and are kind of struggling and feel as if they've been abandoned and that kind of stuff. Like, they don't attach well. And this made it seem like it was way too easy. Everything just turned out way too easy for her. The next thing that I don't like about young adult fiction, they have like bad endings. They don't end well. I mean, yes, there's some that end happy and that some that end fairly decently, but sometimes they just like ruin the whole setup. And the one that I thought did that was The Raven Cycle, and this is The Raven King, the last book in the series by Maggie Stiefvater. I felt like the end, she just backed off. We were supposed to know how it ended. We were supposed to know what happened, and it just didn't pan out the way that we'd been told it was going to through all 3 books, all 4 books. And so I felt like the endings, and it's not just this book that I found that in. I found that in several young adult series. The endings are just kind of okay. The next thing that I have a problem with is that they have teenagers solving world problems. That they have teenagers and these very young people overthrowing governments. That they somehow inspire everyone to join them and fight against everybody. And I think that is shown obviously in The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. You know, there's adults in the world too, and the adults set up the government, and if there's a resistance, there's going to be adults involved too. And it's like, oh, but no, this girl, because she won this, well, basically because she cheated at the Hunger Games, now she is the vision of the revolution, and we're all going to follow her, even though she's just a girl that shoots a bow. And the last one, okay, and the last problem that I have with young adult fiction, and this might be a little bit petty, but has to do with the page count and the size of the words and, you know, the font and all that stuff. So if you look at Wicked Saints by Emily Duncan, and this is true with almost any young adult, and you look at like the size of the words and the spacing of the words, looks like they're just trying to make the book look bigger than it is. Whereas if you look at like adult fiction, I have much smaller words, much less space between lines and stuff. So it just feels like they're just trying to make it longer. I often think of young adult fiction as being fluffy, as in I can just sit and read it and like, oh, okay, that was good, and I'm done. On to the next thing. And that's just kind of like a minor thing. That's not like a major thing. It's just, it would be nice if everything was more uniform. I mean, I know it would make young adult books a lot shorter, but hey, we're trying to save trees here and stuff, I guess. I don't know. It's just something that annoys me a little bit. Okay, so those are 10 things that I like about young adult fiction and 10 things that I don't like about young adult fiction. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you do like it, please like and subscribe. If you want to put a comment, tell me things that you like or don't like about young adult fiction. I'll be sure to respond. And thank you all for watching. Bye.